Oh, yeah, I'm on. Yeah. I'm telling him to put the headphones on. He's already rolling. Dude, it's good to see you. It's only been like 2 years and 3 months or something. The last time you were here, we were just chatting about this. You were in my adjoining suite at the old studio because we were social distance podcasting.
We were, yeah.
Yeah, and it worked. He's still busting the joint up.
Still chilling. But yeah, no, we were at the old place because it was I think it was on the height of COVID, or maybe just the beginning.
No, it was the height because I guess we had to shut down in April, end of March, the country somewhat, and then I waited 4 weeks to decide what I was going to do, and everybody seemed to start to feel a little better about being around. And then I said, well, maybe I can put people in separate rooms or give them the chance to. And I said, I'm not going to give them the chance. It's probably smart to do some shows in separate rooms. I think I had a screen set up where you could see me. Yeah,
but
there's a latency
right in front
thing, though, because I think it was a little behind or something.
Slightly slow.
It was.
But it works. It works.
Yeah, and it's funny when I go back and look at those shows. It's kind of like a little time period piece. It's like those are COVID shows.
Yep.
So the world got funky, got even more funky after.
Yes.
Yeah, and you ended up with COVID.
Yeah, I had COVID 2 times. Most people have had it at least once. I'm shocked to hear someone say like, "Oh, I still haven't had it." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, you definitely
probably just don't know they've had it, right?
Asymptomatic have to be. I'm like, I'm not believing 2.5 years go by and you're still fine. Like, no way, no way, it's not happening.
So you ended up. Now we're both. With the second time you got it, was it worse than the first?
Second time was significantly better. I was only sick for 1 day. Not the same symptoms either. I had cold symptoms. First time, no cold symptoms, no cough, nothing. It was all the other weirdness.
Any long-term effects? Any weird symptoms?
I've been having vertigo on and off.
That's what I remember you talking about. Did you think that was related to that? It's hard to tell.
I don't know, because I've had it from migraines and tinnitus-ish issues like before, but it wasn't. It was like triggered when I get sick. It was triggered when I have like more problems, like high stress will trigger it, but also I think COVID did too, because I just had it more frequently around that time, and I'm like, So I don't really know.
Okay.
Can't really pin that one down.
So we'll just jump around here. You just left the military.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm free. That's why my hair looks long. You can't really see with the hat on.
Yeah, he took the hat off.
It's there.
Like, I've never seen a photograph with anything remotely close to that.
Yeah. I've never had long hair. Oh, I had when I was a teenager, yeah. So I'm free as of about 2 months ago. And that was a big decision. But when you're in the Guard, it's kind of weird. It's not as like abrupt. It's not like life changing in like a dramatic sense. Because like I didn't like leave a base from an Army base where I like lived on, and then I just randomly need to find a new home. Like most of my day to day is the same. It's just I just don't have to go to work once a month. So it's just kind of like I'm like kind of waiting for that phone call like I need to go to work, but no more.
And you got a real job now.
I do. I have what I call the big boy job. Yeah,
big boy job,
a career job. Yeah.
Yeah. The what went into that decision for you to scoot after all those years?
Yeah, it was. I was at the 8-year mark, and the last 1.5 years, 2 years, I think. I wouldn't say I had a personal problem with the missions that we were doing, but there was a lot of politicizing within the Army that was making it complicated, and there was a lot of things that I wanted to do within the Army that I couldn't do anymore. So I couldn't do the job that I wanted to start doing, which was. I went to a tryout for Special Forces, and I wanted to do that with my career, which is a very big job change. That's not something you just walk into. Mm-hmm. And knowing that I couldn't do that as an officer, my job slowly becomes less involved with soldiers and
more administration.
Yes, and having that impact on them directly. And I missed that, and I was not even on a staff position very long. So being an SF and being a team leader was what I wanted to do, and I decided not to do that. But I couldn't come back to it because of an injury. So,
what happened?
So with that, let's see, how long ago was this? 2 years ago, maybe like 2.5 years ago now.
Okay.
I did a tryout for Special Forces in a National Guard unit, and I had passed the assessment. So it was an assessment with this unit before you go to the 3-week selection course, and then you go to the 2-year schooling. Because to be a Green Beret, they're like the jack of all trades. So when they go overseas, they're the jack of all trades. So their schooling can be pretty long and lengthy, which all of those guys are. Like if you're in the Navy SEALs, it's similar, but the missions are different. So I like the mission of what they did as Green Berets. And as an officer, you only get a certain amount of time in the field with soldiers. That's just how it works. And then you become more of a staff position. So I knew I was going to have staff position time, and I wanted to say, you know what, let's give this a try. see if I go through the pipeline. It's hard to pass. Very, very hard as an officer to pass with different selections going into it. And so they have an assessment that you go to for this unit specifically, and then they send you. So we started with 45-ish people. We ended with 4 people by three training opportunities, like 3 drill periods, which each one was like 2 or 3 days. So it's a fun, grueling assessment for a couple days at a time, which is like nothing compared to what you're about to experience. But what they did differently was they're like, well, we have the SF standards of passing things, but we have our unit standards. Okay. So as long as it's not below the SF standards, they can do whatever they want. So we had a good time. I'll put it that way. We had a good time.
All right. Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned before, I think that you'd always had that dream to be in special services. Special forces, rather.
Yeah, I had wanted to look into that when I was, getting into the Army. I was like, wanted to go into the infantry and have that kind of lifestyle, but I knew that there's more that I wanted to do with it. I just needed to learn more about it. And as an officer, you have to get to certain experience and certain rank to even apply to go to the assessment. So before you're a captain, I was able to go to the assessment as a lieutenant, knowing you take a team leader position there after your 2 years as a captain. You have a couple years as a team leader before you're kicked back onto that staff position. So ultimately, the career pipeline that I was going to go down was going to be less and less soldier related. But that was my last opportunity to try to give it a good push and do something very, hard, challenging that most people can't do.
No doubt. I don't know a lot about the entire thing, but I am going through David Goggins' book a second time now, and that whole thing that he went through with the buds. And of course, it's David Goggins, so everything's just nuts. But that process just seems so freaking brutal, man.
Yep.
And I'd imagine it's the same in every branch has their special forces, right?
Like the Army has Green Berets, Rangers, and Delta Force. So the Delta Force is Tier 1 unit.
Well, how's that different than the Rangers? Explain the difference.
Yeah, sure. So it's just sort of the mission set primarily, and then their priority that they get the missions from. So going into Delta Force is a more specialized unit that is our Tier 1 force. Okay. And as our Tier 1 force, they get the hardest missions that we have, the most clandestine operations. So they are the top of the top, and most of the time they pull from Special Forces and Rangers to go to Delta Force. It's like an invite-only selection. That's not exactly what it is, but you can't just apply to that one. Okay. Whereas the other ones, like if you want to go be an Army Ranger, you can go to Ranger School. You can try to go to that unit, which is also so that's a Tier 2 operational unit.
Okay.
So it's when you're in special operations as a whole, you're kind of a little bit away from the normal Army, the big Army. So it goes from going to Delta Force as the top. Special Forces is a different mission than Rangers, where they kind of go into countries, they train an indigenous force that's a partners of ours, and they will go fight with them against a common enemy, whereas the Rangers are sort of like the hit and move group that, they support each other, though. It's not like these dudes only work alone. They really go hand in hand, because the Rangers originally parachute on, take over an airfield, and secure it for the rest of the Army to come into. Originally, like that was the traditional move. Now it's a little bit different on how they work on a battlefield.
So Delta, how long has this structure been around? I mean, is Delta a newer formation? Was it so those levels have always been in place since their inception?
No, so Rangers were technically in World War II. Delta Force was created in Vietnam.
They came later.
Yeah, so they were created in Vietnam era. Not long after the Special Forces units were created as well. So there was different Special Forces that weren't kind of as structured as they have now.
Got it.
But Vietnam was really pivotal for these 2 units, actually all 3 of them, to really grow into kind of what we see. What the training used to be like to get into them was very much similar to like, going into Vietnam, was the ultimate, you are on your own. How do you survive? What is your mission set? And that's how those units kind of really worked originally. Now they've changed these courses over time, because they have to apply different skill sets depending on the war. But that's where they came from traditionally, and now they're still used, obviously, worldwide today.
So when people hear Special Forces, is that the unique groups in each of the major services, as one?
That would be considered special operations. Special Forces are Green Berets, and so they have
That's Army specific then?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they work hand in hand with the Navy SEALs. And the Marines, like, they have a unit as well. The Air Force has a few as well. So, like, they all work hand in hand. But if you're a special operations forces, you typically do a lot of similar training and similar schools, and you're a tier 1 or 2 operator. Whereas the big armies, like conventional big army, is like its own thing. And most people, you have to start in the big army. But during a height of war, they'll take people onto like a direct contract as a Green Beret. So that's what Tim Kennedy did when he was younger. There was height of 2001. Or like 2002, I think is when he kind of went through, and he had like a contract that like put him into that group first, which was very debatable when you talk to some of those guys. They're like, well, I had to go serve in the normal army and go to the 82nd, and I had a deployment, and then I went to the Green Berets. So they had a little more experience. So
the Air Force, do they have a name for that division, or is it just called Special Forces?
So they have tactical ground controllers, and then they have like these other paramilitary unit as well attached to them. So they have their own, like they have 2 separate as well, like a PJ versus like a tactical air controller that controls what's going on with aircraft in the air to support a unit on the ground. There's like a controller on the ground who, you know, has to set up where they're going to shoot what for what airplanes and really do like that trafficking controlling, but it's not like in a tower. Like it's like in a combat zone, you know, attached to like a Ranger unit or something, you know, so that supporting unit. So they all work together on missions, and they've had incidences where they, you know, they don't get along or something, but like in general, but in general, they have to work together depending on the mission. And there's a whole big structure on how they fall and where they fall. Like the Green Berets have different areas of the world that they work in as primary areas for like what they do. So they tend to deploy more in Southeast Asia for one unit, and most of the guys there will learn, you know, different languages for that area, and they will go in and out of there every 6 months to a year. So they kind of they stay in one segment and area. I don't think the Rangers really stay in one area. I think they are kind of deployed all over the place, but the Green Berets are split up to where they might be in like one area more commonly than not. So like 20th group that I tried out for, they work down in South America the most. Okay. And then second to that is going to the Middle East, which everybody goes to the Middle East at some point, it seems.
Right. Mm-hmm. So the public, you know, for those who read all of the spy novels and all the, you know, all the series of, it's fiction, but supposedly based on reality. Mm-hmm. When you hear Special Forces, you know, there's a connotation, but these novels tend to weave in the CIA and all that stuff, so it gets real cloudy and confusing. Is that reality? Is the CIA entrenched with Special Forces for operations and all that stuff? Do the books generally read true? Is there a lot of elements of truth there, or is it more parochial? They're all kind of disconnected.
So from my experience, there was a compound within the compound I was on. There was a smaller compound that had a mix of Green Berets, a couple Special Operations Forces units, and different people that would come in. And I knew there's people from the CIA that also worked there, but they wouldn't really tell you. But like we knew that it was kind of a little hodgepodge of mixed people that worked there. And they would go to other bases and stuff and come back to our base, and our compound is a little bit more of a center headquarters area within the spot in Jordan that we were in.
Okay.
So yes, they work hand in hand with Green Berets. They typically have clandestine units as well that are on the ground giving intelligence to then give to a Green Beret unit, or sometimes it's kind of both, and they go kind of hand in hand. So yeah, they heavily work together.
They're just not identified. Is that right? Like the CIA, like, you know, if this is a group of, let's say Rangers here, there wouldn't be another group here that's easily identifiable as CIA folks, right? It's a different kind of operation.
Yeah, you wouldn't know. They wouldn't really advertise it. Like I can gander that there was one moment in like the Middle East that I met 2 guys that were probably from the CIA, but they said they were in the Rangers, and I'm like, I've never met any other Rangers that are at our compound. Got it. They came over on quad bikes, talked to me because we were on this range. So you know, they probably just said that to make it easier. And why do I need to know? Because I'm just out there with my guys doing some normal Army stuff, and they came out there out of nowhere, and I'm like, who are these guys? And,
what's the preparation? I mean, to go into that, like, what did you have to do physically to prepare yourself to go through the testing and to go through it?
Yeah, so there's an easy way to find the stuff online. Like, fortunately, we can find anything out online about some sort of preparatory thing that you can do, but there's no easy way to execute this because it is very dependent on the person. So I knew that I had to carry a up to 100-pound bag for at least probably 12 to 18 miles comfortably under a certain time. I knew I had to run 5 miles under any condition under a certain time. I knew I had to do pull-ups, rope climb, and really the mental toughness kind of built within this because there's unknowns that they throw at you. There's unknown trainings, there's unknown team building events. So I went there knowing the standards that I had to pass, but I knew I had to pass these under not perfect conditions. Like some people go to the gym and they're like, okay, cool, it's a perfect squat day to PR. And I'm like, my day was I went up and I ran in the morning. I went to work. I went back from work. I rucked again. I would run again for like time, like speed time. I'd go do deadlifts. I'd go do squats, and I'd come back and ruck at the end of the day, like because you have to do it under being tired. And then some days I'll take full days off where I'm like I am really beat down, but you have to do these tasks under not perfect conditions. So I train myself to walk in the snow outside and run.
Right.
I mean, those things that just you're going to have to do, but you have to do it safely too. You know, you can't just go outside at 3 a.m. and run and get hit by a car. So it's kind of like it's hard to do on your own, you know. When
you say ruck, I'm guessing with the pack on, and then what footwear? You're not using your optimal jogging shoes, right?
No.
You're using boots.
Yes. Yeah. So we have Army boots, but like most Army people don't wear a standard issue boot. Those are heavy. Those are clunky. Those are not fixed for your foot very well. So like Nike has a boot that we're authorized to wear. Same with Reebok actually has one.
Interesting.
Garmin. So I would switch between 2 or 3 different kind of boots, and you also have to break in boots if you get new ones. So I had a newer pair I was breaking in, an older pair. I'm like, okay, if these get blown out, I have other ones to use because so much time I was on my feet. And then I had a plan where I would ruck probably 3 days a week. I ran 4 days a week, and I lifted 4 to 5 days a week-ish. So there's crossover. And then the days where I thought I might have put too much mileage on my joints, like on my knees, I would swim instead of ruck. So I'd just do a long swim at the pool and swim for like an hour and just kind of do like a HIIT workout in between. So I managed to not injure myself at that time to go into it. But I did about 6 months of preparation before going into this, knowing that I'm going to have to hold this amount of preparation for probably the next year and a half at least.
Wow.
So it's an interesting mindset where it's like, it's not just working out. There's no like 3-week plan, 3-month plan. This is like you got to build it so you can just maintain it. And so I don't know if I did that perfectly, but I did it enough to pass. So there's that. But it was brutal. Our first day was they go through all of the events that you have to pass that they have at their 3-week selection. We did all of the events in 24 hours. So they normally split it up where there's an event a day. We did all of them in one day. So that weeded out a lot of people really quickly.
I would think.
Yeah. So it was 30 miles of movement total in that 24-hour period between what you do and the surprises they have, which they have a lot. So what they do is a mind game too, because when you go to selection, it's not yelling at you. It's not going to basic training. They'll put stuff on a whiteboard. They'll walk in an office and they're like, you got to pay attention to the whiteboard today. No instructions. So they'll just go out there and change it randomly. So you're in your group of people in your team room, and they're like, figure it out. So they'll just start writing stuff on the whiteboard, random hours. So you just got to keep checking it. So they'll just have these things that say, okay, today you're just going to go out the side and run. It says, bring shoes, bring this, nothing else. You go out, you have a run. You don't know which run, like which test it is. And each Green Beret is watching the people and how you react to things too. Because they don't just drop you for the physical stuff. They'll drop you for your attitude. They'll drop you for if you look in weak. And they were doing that to people. Yeah. There was a guy that was much faster than me at a few things that they just cut him out on the second day for like no reason. Not that I knew. They have some way to evaluate.
Reasons, right?
Yeah,
right.
There's a certain look that some people have that they're like, yeah, we don't like you, and they'll just say, sorry, later. So
holy shit.
Yeah, it was very strange. It was very strange in that regard. And then there's some things that happen that are just like so funny because I was so delusional. Like some of the stuff we did. Just interesting. I can tell you that much. But yeah, they really beat you down.
Well, yeah, you get I imagine at the end of a long 17 hours of just getting your sensory and your physical and your mental sensory just like bashed on. At some point in time, you have to become delusional.
Yeah, I think it was that second training period was 3 days, and it was all land navigation primarily testing. So you would wear your ruck, which was 85 pounds. And you'd have a rifle, and they'd give you these points that you'd have to plot on a map and go find these points. So we did like iteration after iteration. And it doesn't sound that bad, but it's walking 20, 30 miles a day for 3 days. And then the end, they did team building exercises.
85 pounds on your back.
Mm-hmm. And at the time too, like, I'm not even like joking. It was easy to carry that weight because I'd done it so much. I didn't even get tired doing it anymore. It just like, it was like built into me to just have that thing on.
That's a lot of weight, man.
Well, yeah.
To me, I mean, I walk with a 20-pound weight vest, and I'm in my mid-50s, but I will tell you, after like 5 miles, I'm done. 20 pounds can get freaking heavy. I cannot imagine 85 pounds.
Yeah, it's a mental game. So like that period, you know, you're just like physically exhausted, but at the end of that, they had a team building exercise where I can't even give all the depths to it. We're not really supposed to because some of it's preparatory.
Sure.
So they don't really want you to tell people. Like I could, but
I understand.
You know, but at the end of it, so funny, after this very brutal overnight exercise all day, all night, and then the next, like getting into it where I'm like, oh my God, I know we're almost done. You know, like throw my bag down and I sit, and all of the SF dudes that were there's only a couple, like 6 or 7, had like these launchers out in like their hall area where they have like their weapons and supplies like in cages and stuff, and that's where we would always start every morning or end every morning.
Okay.
So we threw our bags down. I was like, I know we're almost done. There's only so many hours left today, you know? And I just threw my bag down, and this one guy handed me boxing gloves. He's like, put these on. And I just looked at him. I was so tired. I was like, what? And he's like, what'd you say to me? He's like, put these on right now. I was like, yep, Roger. Okay. Just, you know, I started to put them on, and he handed some other ones to the guy across from me who was in the training group. And we just had to fight each other. So this guy sat down, cracked open a beer, and he's like, all right, start fighting each other.
You gotta be shitting me.
No, we were so confused. We're just like, is this happening? And I was like staring at him, like trying to talk to him, like mentally. I'm like, let's like take this easy. This could be like an hour. Like I have no idea how long. It was wild, man. But
oh man, so there's an element of randomness to it too. Intentional randomness.
Yeah. So unlike. Now, I haven't gone to ranger school. I've done the preparatory schooling within what I had to do for my job for it. But that school is much different, where it's a slow grind, but it's an easy school, where I think the Green Beret pipeline is because you are supposed to be an intelligent human being that can problem solve. So they test you on problem solving under high intense problems. Yeah. So it's not normal problem solving. It's, okay, you're really tired, go do this. You're really tired. Let's push the limit, hand you some boxing gloves, go fight that guy. We'll just see if you're tough now at this point, and then we'll go do something hard again. Like, that's pretty normal for their job and their mission, because they have to embed in another country, typically with limited resources, in a group of 12, and figure it out. Figure it the fuck out. That's what they got to do.
Yeah.
So they're trained in every capacity throughout their pipeline to not just be a door kicker. You have to be an intelligent human being that can make decisions and also be well-rounded enough, but tough enough to kind of hack it in a new environment. So it's a very special breed of people. You know?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. The ones I have met have been very much a special breed of people. Yeah, the amount of physical duress is one thing, but when you read about some of the things that go through, the amount of mental duress is pretty tough.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've had times where it was just like, I'm like, dude, anything. Like, and just anything. Give me anything. Like leeway, you know? And like, I had just done the tip of the iceberg with this training. Like, I was very proud of myself that I'd passed, but it didn't mean anything.
Got it.
To them, they're like, great, you got a long way to go still. But it was very eye-opening to see that. So when I turned that down, it was tough for me to do, but I felt a need to kind of get other parts of my life put together. I put so much time into this under not a great situation I had, and I was really kind of like avoiding certain problems, I think, that I kind of needed to address. Having a civilian career, civilian life, some normalcy, instead of like, I just came back from deployment and I wanted to go right into doing this, and I would have been essentially deployed again right after 2 years of schooling. It's you know, it takes a special breed of sacrifice there for sure, because it's a life that is like, you can't really go back from it, you know, once you kind of go into it, you know. So it was hard for me to like say, let me just take a break. And I asked them, I'm like, if I say no to accepting it, because they were trying to push me into the pipeline really quickly. They originally said, you'll have like 6 to 8 months with our unit. Once we give you the green light, you'll train with us and then you'll go. So I'm like, that'll give me time to get other things prepared. And then they're like, retention and recruiting issues, we need to push people in faster, you for like next month. I'm like, I don't think I can go next month. I don't have the rest of my life put together the way that I thought I would.
Got it.
So then I was like, if I come back, can I come back? They're like, yeah, you're going to start from zero. I'm like, no problem. So a year later, that's when I started having problems with my back. And I was like, wow, I would have been a year into that training and I probably wouldn't have made it. So
yeah, the things
how the cards laid.
They definitely seem to work out.
Yeah.
I want to make that right turn and talk about what you have going on now. But before I do, can you talk a little bit about what we're hearing about the recruiting problem right now? Because you were just talking about finding people that are suitable to enter these programs and can handle the physical and mental duress that goes with the training. And I'm thinking about the way we're maneuvering in society right now and about that complex thinking, second level thinking. And I would imagine it may be hard to find suitable candidates.
It is hard. It is very hard. I can't give you definitive numbers because I'm not in recruiting specifically, but every year I was in, they were saying their numbers were worse and worse and worse every single year for 8 years straight. I'm like, how much worse can it be at that point? And then when I went to this tryout for Special Forces, which was about 3 years ago, they said that they have the same problem. And I'm like, don't people want to be Green Berets, but they don't actually want to do the job. The job is not fun, sexy, cool. It has those elements, but the job's tough. So where are the tough people at to do this? But the Army also has like two problems with that, right? So this is like what's interesting. And this is part of why I'm getting into different things in my life now that I think will benefit. There's a recruiting problem from the big Army of just getting the right people and the right people involved. And there's a level of people like not wanting to do it. They look down on this kind of profession. There's another part of it too that people are not physically as capable to do these jobs.
That's the thing I would think would be an issue.
There are stories of guys that go to basic training that will jump up on a pull-up bar, second weekend, third weekend, you jump up, you have to do someone tells you to do some, you jump down. There's people that have broke their femurs just jumping off the pull-up bar, not falling, not climbing an obstacle course, just dropping down and not having the physical ability to like have the muscular structure to not break themselves on just dropping off of a pull-up bar that's probably no more than 6 inches above them.
Wow.
So that is one societal issue that comes from a different generation, right? Because when you look at people that joined the military before, forever, it was kids that grew up outside, grew up with Boy Scouts, which teaches you these basic skills.
Absolutely.
Like these were all the kids before any war were doing this stuff. And then they would go into the Army, and going into basic training shouldn't be so life-changing, pivotally hard. It's basic training.
Right.
It should be tough, but people have passed it for generations. And it's been easier over time too. And now we're having that problem. So that's the big Army's problem already off the bat, is having the mindset of kids that don't really see the benefit of it and having the physical inability to do it because they're sedentary in their childhood, whereas before every generation wasn't sedentary like that. And this is like last 20 years it's been like pivotal, like how different it is. And
how do they combat that? Like, what's the plan to combat that?
Well, that's been why it's hard. Like, I don't know if they can have a plan to combat that. Like, they do good at recruiting and spending a ton of money doing like crazy sick commercials that look like Call of Duty. I watched like an Army commercial that looked better than Call of Duty because they used graphics.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a kid come in and like hurt himself doing something basic. Then he gets chaptered out, collects some disability, and he didn't do a day of actual service. Maybe he intended to, maybe he didn't even care. Like, it's just a big problem. I don't think there's anything to combat that. And then on the other side of the house, what I've seen politically in the military, which is really confusing to me, is, I had to get approval from my commander to go try out for Special Forces. He had no issue. I've asked a couple of my friends, and they said, yeah, I brought that up to my commander. He wrote me up and said, if you don't pass, you're not coming back to this unit to your same job. Basically, we're just going to kick you out. Because it was a pride thing that says, oh, you want to leave and go do this. Good luck. If you fail, you're not coming back to your friends that you have here at the unit or a good position lined up. And so there's a big ego issue within people that have been in the military a long time that are high-level officers when we need people to go try out for these units. We need people to go try out for them and be prepared and actually have the ability to try.
Yeah.
Where that comes from, I think if you stay in the Army long enough as an officer, you're used to getting yeses. Like, you're used to getting yeses and things your way, and because it's very like, the structure, you know the places that you're going to go, who you're in charge of, that bandwidth of power that you do have, that you're not used to people that like don't want to go against the grain, even if going against the grain, staying in the freaking Army. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But from their perspective, they care about their careers if they've had a good career. They want good people that are around. If those good people want to leave, well, it just hinders them on their mission.
Some self-preservation. Probably.
So, like, I get part of it, but the other part is, well, then who's going to do these hard jobs? Like, who's going to be doing the hardest jobs in the world? Because it takes a certain kind of person. We shouldn't limit it because someone's afraid to go tell their boss that they want to go try out for it.
That sounds crazy.
And then he had no support on the preparatory side. He just was like, yeah, man, I'm training on my own. I'm like, you're on active duty base? Like, there's no training group for you? He's like, nope, I'm just going to show up. I'm like...
That's someone that wants it, though.
It is true, That's a person that wants it, but that was surprising to me. Like, I wasn't on active duty, so my training was on my own. But coming from that, I was like, wow, that's interesting. That's a problem that I've never really like thought I would see.
So it's just, would you say it's just a different structure within the military then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Maybe a sign of the times. I mean, the military is also probably adapting as well to the quality of the candidate that's out there.
Yeah. Like, they have to try to find a way to adapt, and I'm sure that is chronically hard. I mean, it's hard for the military to adapt in general. They're very based on legacy, and that's where some of these problems come from. There's a lot of legacy tasks that don't necessarily need to be there that cause issues in some ways.
Certainly. Certainly.
Like, when they changed the pipeline to be like going through special forces, they changed it a while ago. They changed a big structural part of it, and people were like losing their minds there. And it's like, well, the big army's just trying to adapt to the future wars by changing their hardest program to make it better.
Sure.
But guys that have been in that program were like, no, it's got to be as tough as it was. It's got to be as structured as we had it back in the day, even though the missions are changing from back in the day.
Yeah.
So that's... But the Army has a big problem with the legacy, and I say it's a problem because it is a benefit. It is amazing, the history we have and the things that you can learn about it and the things that we get to do that like we've done forever. But there's a level of, how is this task within the legacy important to like keeping people wanting to stay in the Army, wanting to like be fit and healthy, have a career? Like, where's the gap here? You know?
For sure. Hey, the other thing, too, that's going on in society is that we're just changing the way we maneuver with each other. And some people call it PC, call it whatever you want it. But when it comes to, like, maybe something that could be viewed as being PC or new norms out in society, they really don't apply to the military. And I don't know how – I don't know in every – I mean, again, it's probably a rabbit hole you don't want to go down, so we won't take you there. But, I mean, in general, there's got to be some issues with like the hierarchy and taking orders and the way the military is always operated and necessary to get the job done to protect the country. But that has to be somewhat being under attack a little bit from outside sources. It has to be.
Yeah. It's, people want to feel individualistic when they get into the Army. And
is that a newer phenomenon?
I think it's more outspoken. I don't think it's a newer phenomenon. I think it's more outspoken. There was a time being gay was technically illegal in armed services. It wasn't all that long ago too. But there's a level of like, you join and you understand that this is part of the sacrifice. This is what you give up your right to have your individual opinions about certain things. You keep them at bay because it's part of our laws. Like, you can't speak against the president while you're serving.
Right. For sure.
But I do understand people should be their individual self within their self to make them happy that they're coming into work. But, to be outspoken about it, like, you signed up for this. No one drafted you in. Like, you picked this profession. You have to go kind of with the rules that the profession comes with. Like, that is why it's called a sacrifice. You don't have to stay in forever either. But it's hard, because then you have people that have problems when they get out, problems with their ability to get jobs, the mental health problem, they come out broken. And so it's just complicated. I think it's just really complicated,
Yeah, no doubt. So it's on the happier times, happier subjects. So what the hell's going on with you here? So what's the plan? Because I mean, you always have your fingers in multiple projects. If I know anything about you,
I do. Almost to a fault, honestly. At this point, no. As you know me, so like we had been on 2 podcasts together now, and I had always ran some sort of creative side business. Always, I've always very much enjoyed that, and as kind of my time and priorities shifted.
You were shooting out of a helicopter. I think that's one of the first things I noticed.
Yeah.
You came on my radar in New York City. Was it?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So,
just like a no-door helicopter. This tiny little thing.
Hanging out the side.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's nuts.
Yeah. Doing all creative projects has always been something of my interest, and I found different ways to make money from it, different ways that I just enjoy it or collaborate with people. You know, it's gotten me the ability to meet and do fun things. So like, it's never going to be out of my blood. But as my priorities have shifted away from the military side of the house, it's kind of, I've almost leaned into it more with working on a side business that, you know, we're going to build an app for fitness that's going to be related to the military.
Right on.
And I think it really helps me to fulfill enjoyment in what I like to do and fulfill a mission that I used to be a part of. So I think it's been a good fit as I've transitioned into finding these creative projects, and I've learned a lot that I've kind of like now steered into, like, you know, this feels like the right avenue for the next kind of part of my life, where I'm taking a step away from the Army, but I'm not really taking a step away from, you know, passion projects, because this is one of them, and quite a big one now, you know, for me. So that's kind of what I'm leaning into. So we're building an application that we want to bring to the fitness community, and the military part of that is going to be probably our biggest customer basis from the people that will probably benefit and need it the most.
So I think when you say fitness app, people have all kinds of weird connotations with that. Everywhere from, you know, yoga to calisthenics to MyFitnessPal.
Right.
You know, like how is what you're doing? Where does it fit into all that?
So one of the biggest things that I saw, so from my story, is, you know, I had injured myself doing Army tasks and Army training that was, you know, not looked at, viewed at by anybody, because I was training on my own. And I overtrained, which essentially is what caused these injuries that are prolonged at this point. Okay. So muscular skeletal injuries in the military is one of the biggest problems that they have right now. And as I've explained to you, sometimes it's a generational thing where people are coming in not growing up athletic, but a big part of it too is the job that we have, you know, especially in combat arms, is carrying heavy stuff, carrying it on your back.
For sure.
Having to move, and the Army started to adapt a better way of testing this, having a measure of performance. So they changed their PT test from something they had for like the last 50 years or more over to what they call the Army Combat Fitness Test, which now includes stuff like a deadlift. Has a plank. So is it
harder now?
It is harder, but is mostly more diverse.
Okay.
So that's their way of trying to adjust to having a more well-rounded soldier that might not hurt themselves, because our old test was push-ups, sit-ups, and a run. And I'm like, when am I going to do any of those in a combat situation? When have I done any of it? Prepping, live fire ranges, like none of that. So now they have a more diverse test. And that is one way to measure performance that the Army's put as a standard that everyone's going to have to change to within the next year.
Okay.
Now, the musculoskeletal injuries that people have are already going to be there, but my fear in knowing what I know about being in the military is that when you're applying this test, it is going to be very hard to implement correctly, because you're giving high-risk movements to people that might not have the structure from a big group of people to train this, because the Army's used to doing a lot of big training, collective training, and how are you going to do this and teach a guy a deadlift? But there's no strength and conditioning coach because he's in the Army. He's not paying a guy at a gym. So it becomes complicated. So we built an app that is going to be doing body tracking on a phone. It's going to be portable, and it's going to be able to give out data that will tell somebody parameters that they're going to be in and out of doing something correctly versus incorrectly, and by how much of a measurement. And this will be programmed into this application to then help them understand where they're at with their movements that can help them for part of this test or help them for part of any goal that they have. So the measure of performance is one side of this house. The measure of effectiveness is, I think, where the Army lacks. We do things on performance in the Army to say this weight of a deadlift will get you this score and you will do this with your career, or this within a schooling that qualifies you. But what's the effectiveness scale of doing this? Okay. So we want to try to get this kind of where you mix these two together, where you're getting the data that you can utilize as a soldier at your level. Okay. And then you can actually figure out how it's going to be effective in what you're doing with your commander, with your team leader, with your peers, instead of just saying, oh, I passed this, but are you passing it at a level where you can improve it on the scale there, or are you doing enough things on the side that will actually help you? Like, do you want to go to the gym on your own because you have your own goals too? Like, what resources do you have?
Got it.
So I found this shocking. I went to Fort Bragg about the beginning of the summer. I talked to the strength and conditioning coaches there. There's a program there called H2F, Holistic Health and Fitness, that's implemented starting at Fort Bragg, which is a really big collective base for the 82nd Airborne, our soft units. Yeah, that's where the big Army really starts implementing things soldier-wide. And I went there and I talked to some of the strength and conditioning people, and they said in a brigade, I think it's actually a battalion size element, maybe about 600 people, they only have a handful of strength and conditioning people for the whole battalion. So what happened is when a guy wants to come in and talk to them, talk to his commander, to go in and talk to the strength and conditioning guys, they help him make a plan, they help him with some of his form, then he goes out the door and he has to go back to PT. He doesn't train there with them all the time. So a handful. 5 or 6 people for 600 soldiers.
Why?
You can't allocate enough people and resources to really dig into finding every problem for every soldier.
Okay.
And most of those guys too, they will be in the Army and they'll go through like a PT plan, but they're not really going to be learning from a professional all the time.
Understood.
They'll learn from a squad leader with experience.
Understood.
But people are different and dynamic. So we wanted to make an app that can help the everyday soldier, but then in the structural part of the Army, like a squad leader can have 12 people under him. He might be able to have that profile and see where his progress is. And then you bring that to a commander who's like, I'm a hard charging guy. I want everyone to pass this by this rate. So he looks good. Well, they can say, okay, before we get injuries, let's bring you some data. Like let's show you what's happening at your unit.
Got it.
So that's kind of what we want to try to solve, because most soldiers won't get the one-on-one treatment. They just won't be able to.
So does the app interact with the phones or with the watches?
So it's like a visual app on the camera phone right now.
Okay.
We'll be able to implement it with other wearables in the future. I'm sure there's an ability to have a partnership so that it actually does mesh into this holistic environment where it's not just the data you're seeing on movement, but the movement data is lacking in such a way that I fear for people learning how to do a deadlift. Like, how do you know when you need to go up and weight? How do you know when you're doing it right in the first place if you don't get that special treatment, and you're never going to?
Good point.
So we're trying to solve that problem first, I guess you could say.
Okay. Now, how did this come about? Was this just a collection of an idea that was brought to you? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so actually through Instagram. This is kind of funny. This is where I meet so many people. I had met my buddy Andrew, and he is a partner of mine now for this app company, but he had started this idea, and originally they had kind of had an idea of having it be a hardware at gyms, and gyms could buy it, and they would partner with hardware on gym equipment. And I kind of brought to them, after a couple months of hanging out with them and stuff, and they wanted me to do marketing originally, just to like help them out with it. And I was like, have you guys ever thought about the military for this? And they're like, well, that'd be cool too. And I was like, do you know the Army's changing their fitness tests for the first time in 50 years? And this is literally perfect for them. So we had started to talk about this more and started to see the problems that, were there, and having something that is easy to use on a phone is good for an everyday soldier.
No doubt.
So there's some simplicities that I was able to problem solve with it. And then some things that they learned that were like, here's some of the limitations. This app idea is not exactly pivotal. There's more apps that are like this, but some of the specifics that, I'm not really going to specifically go into.
Of course.
We can't, there are like leaps and bounds that you need to go through to make this work well. And that's been a problem this is why this hasn't been created for the Army yet, because it's hard to do. So we're trying to do something that's very challenging, but it is a common need other people have found with other applications. But in the Army, they don't have anything for that.
Damn.
They have nothing.
That's strange.
It is, right? Yeah,
no doubt. Are you close to launch? Where are you all at in the launch process?
Yeah, so then the last, since I've been involved, it's been about 2.5 years. We were working, building out this demo app to be able to show to people, just with sweat equity. It was just us. And then we took on a bigger partnership with a company called TrueFit here in Pittsburgh. Okay. And the owner of that company has been working on our app with us. So he saw some of the work that we were progressing with in the summer, me going out to bases, going to some conferences, and he wanted to help us out and say, let me help you guys out, get you a better demo version of an app to then get more investment opportunities opened up, because we were just lacking at showing what the capability we wanted to have versus what we could just physically pay for.
Got it.
So now we're at a place where we have a demo app. It looks really good, and we're going to have it's going to move into a beta app probably by the end of this year potentially. And along the way, now we're actually really talking to investors about, the amount of capital we need to really launch this. And then we'll start going to the military again with the connections I'd made and say, hey, here's what we have thus far. We want to test with soldiers. We want to test with gyms. I have some like alliances with guys at Bragg that run gyms, and they're also in the soft units there. So we have like the ability to really kind of catalyst this, and now conversations of, the investment are happening because our plan's been more effective and more sharpened, and we're understanding our customer more. So I think we're in a really good spot. And of course, we're going to test with gyms locally and, have fun being able to do that with people that are strength and conditioning coaches first and foremost, for certain. PTs and MDs that can really give us like science behind it and applicable use, like a strength and conditioning coach with a client. Like how does that help them out too, so we can bring it to market outside of the military?
But the military opportunity there, is that the uniqueness, is that the niche?
I think it is. And the structure of the app too is obviously going to be available for other people to buy on their own or be able to use at a fraction of the price from like a Peloton or a Mirror. So it is for the everyday person to use. But that customer is like, you look at the military person, those people are required to be athletes at their job. Not athletes at a high level, just they have to be. There's no other job. You have to keep up with that. So if you're required to go to work out, your risk of injury is just going to go up because you're forced to go there.
Certainly.
No one at the gym has to be forced to go there. You sign up and go if you want to. So that job, that customer, like we have enough people there that need, the ability to at least better improve their fitness while they're there because they're required to be there for it. So why would you not try to hit those guys up and say, if you want a good career in the Army, if you want a career where you're happy with not having injuries, or if a commander doesn't want 30% of his people to be non-deployable, well, how do you fix that? They're all required to work out by doctrine. They have to do certain things, but, why is there less support than there should be?
Yeah, it sounds like it. And the funny part about it is I think you just nailed it. You're required to be athletic or maintain an athletic stance, presence with your job. But at the same time, it's like, how risky is that? It's incredibly risky. No one thinks about that, but that's incredibly risky if there's not a plan and a system in place where you are performing your athletic training correctly.
Yes. And if you ask any group of Army people, like I'll bet money, if you ask them what is a good workout, they'll have an answer. And it's going to be something along the lines of this. A good workout means I sweat, it means I'm sore, and it means I'm tired. Generally speaking, take an uneducated person that has done workouts, and that is probably the description they have.
No question.
Right? So it's not that everybody in the Army is uneducated, but if you take the average soldier doing the lower level work, they don't go through training classes to learn how to work out necessarily. Some of them might, but the average guy doesn't. That's going to be his answer. So at that parameter, right, I might as well just wake you up at 2 a.m, put you in a sauna, and go punch you in the face. Does it not fit the bill? You'll be tired, you'll be sore, and you'll be sweaty.
It does, brother. It does. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So can we make an app that not only is useful for them from a command structure, but they can learn from? They're like getting to learn what their movement patterns are.
Yeah.
So that when someone else sets a goal for them, or if they set a goal for themselves, they have the ability to actually functionally do something about it, not just go through the motions.
Yeah, and you would think that it would be excellent because there's obviously, to stay in the military requires a certain level of discipline anyways.
Right.
And the idea of using the app, they would be more inclined to use it than maybe civilians would because we're not as disciplined as the military.
We don't have to be.
Speaking.
Yeah.
Right, because we don't have to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You can,
correct.
It is like a blessing and a curse in our country. You can do whatever you want. Most of the time, you'll still be fine. Even if you make the worst decisions, you'll still be fine.
It's too easy just to survive anymore.
It is, right? But it's like, it's just, we need good people that want to and can physically stay in those jobs. We need good soldiers. And even more, like I look further into this for myself personally with other people, is that there's a mental part of this too that's a big deal. Guys that get injured, that can't do their job, then get kicked out for maybe something that could have been avoidable. And then it doesn't help your mental state if you are incapable of moving around and doing stuff with your job or out of your job. And so how many times do guys get hurt and they're on a profile and then they get kicked out of the military, but then they don't have a plan outside the military because they never plan to get kicked out? It's like, how avoidable could that have been to keep a good soldier that we need a good soldier anyways? Give him that option to be able to stay in, or an option to improve his own career, go into the Green Berets, because he can, if he has to do his own training on his own, then at the very least you're giving him a tool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I just, as an outsider looking in, I can't imagine that physical training is not a priority, period, for every soldier at any level.
Yep. It is, but it is in such a
structured way.
It's actually quite the opposite. It's overly structured, or
it's rigid. Or
Fort Bragg, they'll do big group runs at like a brigade level, which is like thousands of soldiers, and that's one of those things that's a traditional thing. Like it's a camaraderie to have thousands of people wake up at 4 a.m. and go on a really slow run, but most people don't benefit from it. Then you have a couple that just heat cat out because it's too hot and they're not in good shape and they're having to keep up with the run. But that's one of those things where the Army has like structures of training together, but individualistic training that's complex and diverse movements. That's going to be hard to adapt for the Army. That is already hard to adapt right now, and it's not even implemented yet. But my friends and pals that I know, they're saying this is a big Army problem right now. And I'm like, I thought it'd be a problem in the Guard and the reserves, because I'm like, how am I supposed to train for a deadlift?
Right, but you're saying it's actually in the Army.
It's across the board. So this problem's across the board.
I would just imagine that if you're telling me the Army has not thought this through, it's just more tradition, and just this is the way we do it. This is the way we're going to continue to do it, and we're just not going to look beyond.
Well, they have thought this through for this change. This is what the best change to try to implement something that makes a well-rounded soldier.
Okay.
But in the process of making it, streamlined and effective in training and outputs and actually getting good results out of doing this, there's going to be hiccups across the way.
Sure.
Asking someone to learn to do a deadlift and they've been in the Army for 16 years and now he's required to do it, and he's been, deployed 3 times and has injuries, but he still has to do the deadlift too. It's just going to be interesting. It's going to be complex to have to solve that problem for a guy who's like 35 in his career versus a dude that's 18 who's never worked out versus a guy that's broken. He's done a lot of workouts, but now he's got to adjust as a leader of soldiers. What's he going to do? So those are two ends of the spectrum that are crazy. Most people in the middle probably be okay.
Yeah.
Most is relative, but it's job dependent too. But so it's a complex change that the Army's making. I have positive thoughts about the output of it because I think it's going to make a better soldier. But our app, we're hoping to, I have a long-term goal too of looking at how we can get this into high schools and athletic programs so that there is an ability that getting into colleges, being able to train better, being able to have a healthy, holistic mindset, and then also having the ability to go into the military without issues is, a big improvement society that we can try to make. Says that we can sit around and hang out, but there's a way to inspire people to hopefully make some of these better choices before they're adults and they don't have problems coming up because they just will inevitably. Yeah,
well, we're also banking against human laziness too.
Yeah,
I mean that's like I cannot imagine being a recruiter period today in the military. I mean I don't have any statistics here, but I would imagine, again, outsider looking in, it's got to be insanely difficult.
It is. It is for those
guys. The video
yep.
game generation are now in their mid-20s, early 20s.
Yep. Yeah.
Sedentary doesn't even describe it. Like I get it. I understand the aspects of it, but wow.
Right.
Breaking a femur jumping off of a pull-up bar.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Right. It is a thing.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
I know. Like I heard that story and I was like in awe. I was like, what? Like that's even possible? I'm like, I've done some pretty dumb stuff. Femur never broke. Probably should have. Not once have I thought falling from a pull-up bar and just dropping down on my feet, I would break something. Like, what?
Well, how does this work? So, like, if a young man walks up to the recruitment office, just generally speaking, 18 years old, he signs. Does he have to be within a certain weight and height? Do they give him an outline of what's going to be expected of him? You have 4 months before you have to sign, and you need to get in shape, you need to do this. That's all laid out for them to understand?
Yes, but recruiters might nudge this.
What does that mean?
They want to get somebody in the door to make their number. But also they do know that they need to give the correct information to somebody. Like there is a height, not a height limit that I can think of specifically, but a weight limit on both ends of the scale. If you're too small or if you're too big, there still
is. I can't believe it.
There actually is, yeah, surprisingly. And then I know recruiters have worked with people in different areas to improve their ASVAB, improve their physical stuff, so they give them essentially some sort of programs they can go do. I don't know what it looks like with the ACFT, this new training. I don't know if they go into basic training having to do that there. I think they work their way into doing it by the end of basic training. That's only 2 months, though. So I don't know about you. I learned how to deadlift when I was pretty young. I was like probably 13 or 14.
Hopefully.
And I don't think I was doing it like good and heavy by the time I was like 19.
Right.
I had probably done it on and off, but like I actually got taught how to do it well, but like I didn't really know like doing the repetitions of it until it started really becoming like comfortable to like, pull weight correctly.
Yeah, correct.
You know, and I still have a problem with my back. So
it just seems like a daunting task. I mean, I believe that we're still an intelligent creature, but you were talking about you needed they need people to be able to think on their feet, and they need to be problem solvers in general. And I just think that second level thinking, we don't do a lot of that in society, period. I mean, I'm just hoping that there's enough candidates out there that can problem solve. That's a different thing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so do I. But that's where, I do have the idea that, at least what makes this country great is you're able to make things and progress things in a certain way that will help everybody else. That's the benefit of what we have. That's the benefit of the capitalism we have, where companies get to make things. That's the benefit of having ideas to solve problems. Yeah. And that's part of the mission of what we're trying to do is be able to solve a problem that is, a problem that's obvious there, but I think it is a catalyst for other layers of problems, having anxiety, having, high stress, having obesity. It stems from like what nature intended for us to do. It's to walk around, be outside, not be sedentary, have problems to solve in the world so your brain doesn't create them yourself. Unfortunately, a lot of people have that where their life is so good, but where does anxiety come from when your life's so good, right? But having challenges, having things to physically overcome can help the mental side. That's why I like things like climbing and jiu-jitsu, because they don't make you think like creatively, specifically on those tasks, but it puts you in a bind where then you will have to think of it creatively.
Certainly. You're
forced to, because if your arm's twisted around like this in jiu-jitsu, you're going to have to think about how to get out of there, while under heavy breathing and tension, So I think there's an ability to like leverage fitness and, preventing injuries and preventing issues that could come up just starting with some of the basic structures, but giving people some tools where they need it most to start with those basic structures, I think is really important.
Well, it's a quality of life issue for me. I mean, I think if you don't have problems to solve in your life, if you're not challenged in your life, that goes along with interests and things. If you're not doing that stuff, it's going to have a negative effect on your quality of life. There's no question.
Yeah, it will.
I mean, you would say, well, life's easy and simple. Well, it doesn't work that way. It always has a reverse effect. The easier your life is, the softer you become, not just physically, but mentally.
Right.
But, we hear people that push back on that. I mean,
right.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. In my generation, Gen X's, we raise these children now, and some of them are having problems because we were helicopter parents and we really gave them an easier life than we had. And in reality, did we? I mean,
right.
We didn't have that bad probably, and we had to do a lot for ourselves, and we probably shielded them too much. And that's probably what the military is probably dealing with right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
So you still doing?
It's true. It's true in some regard.
You still doing all your creative, all your video work? Are you still in that sphere?
I am. So my job is like a marketer, and I work remotely. So that's my side project is this business. But I do it. It's just not. It hasn't been a priority because of this kind of shift in what I want to really be working on.
Now it's your civvy.
Yeah, right. So it's like, I want to get back to the veteran space in some capacity more than I want to work on films, but I still like to work on that in my free time. So I'll take on projects here and there or clients, but I really look into things I'm interested in more. So when someone has an interesting idea or if someone is involved in a community, then I might want to get involved to just be able to say, hey, like I'll kind of give a little bit of my time and use my skill set, keep sharpening it, but then give some of my time, or I'll take less of the income part of it and just be able to enjoy the experience of it,
Sure.
Yeah.
You still involved in First Victory?
I have not been, yeah.
Wow.
So because of all the distribution issues that happened, I initially had to put a big pause on it. I had like a bunch of orders that were back ordered for like months. I remember. And I was having problems really being able to keep that together. And then, I accepted some time into the Army full time to work on the COVID operations, and that's when I just put a pause on everything. And I was like, that's what I got to work on.
Well, unpack that. Unwind that for me.
Yeah,
Tell
sure.
me what that was.
Yeah. So in 2020, all the good stuff happened.
You don't say.
Yeah. The government had people that were working, to help in nursing homes and hospitals, and I volunteered my time. At the end of the summer, I started to volunteer my time to work in them. I had another job. But I wanted to work and, help out in these hospitals and be around some of the soldiers that I had prior. And as a captain, I kind of knew this might be one of my last times to get to really be hands-on. So I wanted to stay in a position where I could work in the field with them. And there's other officer jobs I could have probably picked where I was more admin full-time. Mm-hmm. But it was just to last throughout COVID. So what happened initially, it's like, it'll be a month or two of some work. And I was like, easy paycheck. Cool. Easy paycheck. I think it'll be a good break from my job, hang out with soldiers, I'm like, this is what I need right now. This is perfect.
Sure.
And then they just kept extending it. And each time they extended it, the missions got harder and harder, where it was pretty straightforward at first. We'd get called from the state. They'd say, hey, there's like a nursing home. They don't have any people to work there because everyone got COVID at once. So you need to cover 10 days worth of stuff with people, like with your group of soldiers, like the medics. And it started pretty straightforward. And then it got into some of these places didn't have any funding. They didn't have any nurses at all. We'd show up and we'd have to set up everything, like start to finish, like all their procedures for COVID. I had to teach people how to schedule out the shifts properly, how to do things certain ways. I got taught by the CDC how to do this. Like they came on site after it got so bad. Mm-hmm. They would walk through it with us. So I ended up being in charge of a big part of the western part of the state, and I got called to, I think, 10 missions total in about 8 or 9 months, and each one lasted around 2 weeks, more or less. So I was gone a lot. I'd be gone 10 days, 2 weeks, more or less, come home for a couple days, get called again. But we, as a team, worked every holiday, the majority of weekends, all winter, half the summer. But those guys kicked ass. I mean, I tried to make it as good as I could for them, having to call them in on Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm like, I'm calling you guys in, but I'm also going to buy as many beers as I can and put it in my hotel room. And at least Christmas Day we'll have something to do, whenever you're off shift, because it was just definitely brutal work, especially for some people being really young in the Army. Like the one girl that I had, she had just gotten out of her basic training 6 months before this. Then she got put into doing this, and it was just, seeing people pass away a lot frequently. You get to miss a lot of time from your own family. Your health is then
it was a sacrifice.
Hindered,
It was a sacrifice for sure.
So I had the best time given the bad circumstances with that group, and I was really happy to end my career having a full year of being able to work with the people full time and give my time with them and just suck it up with them, So it was an interesting experience.
You think we're past it now? And it's a loaded question, I know. But as you watch society now and what your experience is, past it, meaning it's going to be part of our life, I think, going forward as a disease. Yeah. But do you think the crisis stage is gone now?
I think so. I think we've adapted to what it is. I think we have had to adapt to what it is because that isn't really going places. We initially had to adapt in a response way. Right. I think we're adapting in a realistic perspective now where we saw pros and cons of that response. It's debatably hard to see how much change wearing a mask did or the vaccines did, but at the end of the day, realistically, COVID just probably won't evaporate. Mm-hmm. So no matter what we do, people should probably maintain a level of being like self-aware, but we just needed to adapt to the disease that really is just probably going to be here.
Yeah, it's when you just go out now and you see society, do you think we're in a better place, like in terms of how the level of awareness that people have? The reason I ask that is I'm still not. I did the first big event in my life since COVID. I went to the Elton John show, which was still outdoors, but we got crammed in like sardines on our way out because they closed the gate or something. We're all just like, we're just jammed in there and we're moving like real slow. And I'm like, oh, you got to be shitting me. And I'm like worried about it. And that's not like me. But I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to be this, this normal again. If that's normal, I don't know. But do you think more people feel that way, do you think? Or do you think most of society is ready just to get it back on and just start living again?
I think the majority of society is ready to just continue doing what we need to do, and I haven't felt necessarily that things are back to normal myself either.
Okay.
Like I personally haven't. And I think it's just the dynamic has shifted and it hasn't really kind of reset to where it was. I can't necessarily say that it's in a bad spot, though. I mean, I'm really happy that people are more aware and paying attention to shit like this. I mean, that is a benefit that people don't talk about. I'm like, when have you ever looked at your health or cared about it? It's opened up a can of worms of people to be like, oh, whoa, what prevents this? Oh, who'd have thunk? Working out in sunlight can help.
Yeah, go figure, right?
So at least it brought in those conversations despite the political back and forth.
Yeah, even with the political part being aside, I did see a lot of, it was funny, the pandemic should have, I think, made people more aware of their health and maybe spur some action. But I also saw a lot of people going the other direction during the pandemic, I mean, packing on pounds, drinking like a fish. I mean, it seemed like to be the pandemic activity at a time where we are being put into a pandemic because there's a disease out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know where we are. I mean, hopefully we have a heightened awareness of because in the end, would you not agree? I mean, our health is our own responsibility.
Yes, and I think people probably, no matter what side you're on, probably figure that out. At the end of the day, it is going to be your own responsibility at the end of the day. And, you need to try to do what you can do best for that, because you shouldn't rely on other people just like you shouldn't for anything else. No one else will just do stuff for you.
100%.
This isn't any different, So, it comes at a time where the research is always that debatably hard thing for people. But look at some of the basics that make humans humans. Yeah. Some of those basic health structures, I think, will ultimately make you better. You will prevent COVID in at least a relative sense by just being healthier with less weight on you. No doubt. And then you'll avoid God knows how many other things too if you actually implemented some of this lifestyle change. So that's my hope,
I hope you're right too, my friend. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time.
Dude, we got to do this more often as opposed to waiting like 2 years, right?
Yeah, that's been a while.
It's been I didn't know what was going on with you for a while because I followed you on social media, as I always did, and it seemed like you were there was some traveling, but now I understand where you were during the COVID era.
Yes. Yeah. I was a little off the grid for a little while. Yeah.
And welcome to the civilian life, my friend.
The civilian life. We'll see how it goes.
Next time he's here, his hair is going to be like hanging down below his shoulders and
full beard.
Oh, that would be something. He said it. The challenge. Definitely keep me abreast of that app.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
We'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
All right, Pard.
Have a good one.
Friends, we're out.
See ya.